Inserting a custom fitting. By accessing the drawing menu, both for mechanical systems and electrical systems, you can choose between various types of fittings, in 3D or on a level. Fitting choices must be made on the basis of the type of connection necessary and in relation to the system category. Each fitting is characterized by different parameters that affect the shape of the object and define its profile. If you activate one of the fittings, such as a T-fitting pressurized, or a T-fitting electrical, just as for pipes, these types of objects can be inserted in 3D, and a specific toolbar menu at the top also becomes available to assign levels, or we can simply let the program assign it automatically. The Properties toolbox shows a few differences related to geometry and characteristics of the fitting. In the Characteristics section, you have the Transition field, which shows the object material. By clicking on the fitting field, the three buttons appear, allowing you to perform the same operations described for the pipes. Therefore, with the plus button you can create a new fitting in the project library based on the set parameters. With the central button you can access the project library editor, in which you can make changes to the object. With the third button you access the BIM object libraries to change the material of the fitting. For each fitting, default values are set for the various parameters that characterize it and which we can view by clicking on the plus button. For example, for a T-fitting pressurized, the default parameters are thickness 1 mm. The external diameter of the connections 6.00 mm. The internal diameter of the connections 4.00 mm. The external diameter of the C connection 6.00 mm. The internal diameter of the C connection 4.00 mm. The length-diameter ratio between the length of the section relating to the connection and the pipe size, diameter for circular pipes and base for rectangular pipes. For all three connections the value is 1.0. The angle between connections A and C. The connection types for A, B, and C is female. The localized loss coefficient 11 equal to 3.000, which obviously does not affect the graphical representation of the model. By selecting one of the parameters present in the configurator, the meaning of the corresponding item is shown below. From the configurator, by modifying the parameters described, you can customize the fitting. Remaining on the example of the T-fitting pressurized, the value of the ratio is changed to 2.0, then clicking on the green flag, the new fitting is stored in the project library ready for use in the model. Before proceeding, however, you'll need to deactivate the Smart MEP mode, unchecking the corresponding field, otherwise the fitting would be automatically configured in relation to the MEP object to which it is connected. If you're working in 3D, a first click generates the fitting that remains linked to the mouse cursor, in correspondence with the connection A, so that it can be moved and possibly connected to another MEP object present on the drawing. To change the coupling node to the mouse cursor, you can use the F5 or F6 function keys. With a second click, the junction is set into position and, in the case of the T-junction, if the mouse cursor is linked to the connection port, a protractor appears at port C, and can be used to define its rotation angle, similarly to pipes with the directional cube. In general, for fittings you can graphically define the rotation angle of a branched section in 3D space. On the other hand, when the fitting is inserted on a level, the object is generated with its axis on the horizontal plane, which means that in 2D you can't choose the rotation angle. Alternatively, you can create the custom fitting in the project or user library and then insert it on your drawing workspace. You can access the project or user library from the BIM Objects Library node under the navigator to create a T-joint, or click on the second button that appears in the connection field and directly access the project library editor. From the selected fitting library, the toolbar buttons on the right provide you with the possibility to add a new fitting or create a copy of a fitting that may be already present in the library. The columns in the data sheet relating to the selected fitting show the same parameters present in the configurator that appear when clicking on the plus button in the fitting field. In the case of a T-fitting, with respect to the configurator, the field's capacity, in liters of fluid, and mass, which expresses the weight of the fitting, are also present and calculated by the software starting from the volume of the fitting and its density, shown in the geometry section of the toolbox on the right. Furthermore, in the first column relating to the dimension, some of the most significant variables that can describe the model are shown by default. By modifying these parameters, you can see the model variations already during preview. Once the customization is complete, simply confirm changes by clicking on the green flag. Then close the project library. To insert the T-fitting, activate it in the drawing menu and deactivate the Smart MEP mode. This allows you to select the custom fitting freely from the library. Then select the size field and the relating button with the 3 dots to open the corresponding library, where you can select the fitting as created, view its parameter values, preview the model and confirm choices with the green check. At this point, insert the customized model on the drawing as described above. Modifying a transition. After generating and positioning a fitting on the drawing, you can then select it to also edit the model position and its possible rotation angles, depending on the type of fitting chosen. When you select a transition connection type in 3D, it becomes red. The labels indicating the center of the relative connectors are shown in correspondence with the connections. A dashed gray line represents the axis of each section of the fitting, while in one of the nodes of the object, which generally corresponds to the connections plus a possible central node to the model, an anchor appears with a triad of axes. Their functions are the same as those seen for the pipe object and whose actual position is identified by an orange circle. For some types of fittings, pink circles and yellow arrows are also enabled. Using these object grips, you can change the model angles and its geometry too. The anchor allows you to move the fitting rigidly in 3D space. By clicking on the orange circle identifying the anchor node, the object connects to the mouse cursor and can be moved in 3D. To change the anchor position, use the F5 or F6 keys or just click on the anchor icon to move it to the next node. With a second click the position of the fitting is fixed and, based on the type of fitting and the position of the anchor, the software enables you to choose a possible rotation angle using the protractor, similar to what happens when inserting the object. For example, in the case of a T-joint entity, if you move it along the drawing area and the anchor is on connection port A or B, when clicking on the 3D node to place the transition type connection, the protractor that allows you to define the angle of rotation appears. The 3 axes next to the anchor enable the object grip. Selecting one of the faces of the cube that appears in association with the object grip, you can also do the following. Rigid displacements of the object according to the direction and verse specified by the arrows. Rotate around the axis by selecting one of the orange circles. Orient the object grip on the top using the green arches. The yellow arrows are placed in correspondence with the connections and allow the branches of some fittings to be rotated rigidly. If you click on a yellow arrow, a protractor appears on the connection allowing you to rotate any branches around the axis orthogonal to the connection to which the object grip is constrained. The rotation is the same that is enabled when inserting a transition type connection on the drawing or, as described above, when moving it in 3D. The yellow arrows are also enabled on elbow curve object types in order to rotate the object with respect to the axis of one of the 2 connections. The pink circle allows you to reshape the angle between the connections of some fittings, taking advantage of the protractor support that appears when you click on it. In particular, you can modify the curvature angle between the port connections, A and B, for the elbow curve. The angle between the A and C connections for some T-fittings. The angle between the B and C ports for some Y fittings. The angle between the C and D ports for some X fittings. At the same time, the rotation value is also updated in the Properties toolbox in the Dimension field, if the variable relating to the angle being changed is present, and in the Geometry section. Once the object has been modeled, the information related to the model is shown in the geometry field in the toolbox on the right, similarly to the pipes. Furthermore, the fittings also have an insulation and coating section where you can assign insulation or coating materials in the same way as for pipes. In addition to the geometry, all the other properties of the selected fitting are shown in the toolbox on the right. You can choose the system to which it is assigned or modify its characteristics, such as, for example, the connection type for each single connection port. In the Height Reference System section, you have the Level field, which shows the level to which the connection belongs, and the Delta field, which specifies the height, with respect to the level of the node where the anchor is positioned. By moving the anchor to one of the pipe's other nodes, you can also read its height value. You can modify the level or the delta value in the same way as described for the piping. Modification of a transition type connection can also be carried out on levels but with the following limitations, due to the 2D representation. There are no yellow arrows for rotation purposes as the fitting is positioned with its axis in the horizontal plane. The pink circle is activated only on those fittings for which a rotation of the branches in the horizontal plane is allowed. In correspondence with the anchor, replacing the group of 3 axes for 3D rotations, in the two-dimensional environment, you have the classic object grip that allows, for example, to move or rotate the connection rigidly in plane with respect to the node on which it is positioned. All other 3D view editing operations are also valid. For example, even in 2D, you can modify the dimension relative to the point where the anchor is positioned or assign the fitting to a different level. If, on the other hand, you want to make changes that concern further parameters that cannot be changed graphically, such as the length of the fittings or the dimensions of the profiles, you can follow these 3 methods if necessary. Select the object, click on the plus button from the Transition Type Connection field of the toolbox and configure a new transition type connection, modifying its parameters. Clicking on the green flag, a copy of the new object will be created in the project library and the model on the drawing will be replaced by the one just configured. The same operation can be done with pipes and with MEP objects in general. The fitting can be replaced with another profile already created in the library. Select the object and deactivate the Smart MEP mode in order to open the library from the Size field. If you select a profile already present in the library and confirm with the green check flag, this profile will replace the model selected on the drawing. You can select the fitting on the drawing and access the project library editor by clicking on the central button in the connection field, or by accessing it directly from the navigator. In the library, you can identify the profile to be customized, select it and modify the values of the parameters. When you click on the green flag, the changes made in the project library will be made to all those models with that profile already present on the drawing. The properties contained in the toolbox, on the right of the project library editor, are related to the type of entity, regardless of the selected profile. This is generally true for all MEP entities. Therefore, if you make changes to the properties, such as the title, the material, the type of the connections, all objects belonging to that type of fitting will undergo the same changes. For example, if you access the library editor from the Transition Type Connection field, for an entity of type T and change the C property, from rectangular to circular. Once the project library is closed, all entities of this same category, already generated on the drawing and those that will be inserted later, will have the connection port C set to circular.